All right. All right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining us for our City of San Jose Business Development webinar series. My name is Jiawei and I work for the City of San Jose's Economic Development Department, and I will be facilitating today's webinar. So today's topic is on Certified Access Specialist. Before we get started, I have some important items of note. This webinar will have live interpretations in 4 languages: Spanish, Vietnamese, Mandarin. I take that back, in 3 languages, so English, and then it will be interpreted into Spanish, Vietnamese, and Mandarin. So for those who needs the interpretation service, you can look on the bottom of your screen and you'll see the globe icon. Go ahead and click on that and select the language of your choice. I'll give you a moment to do that.
No globe yet. So
Yeah, give me a second.
we're all dying for the globe.
So you should see it now.
Not yet. David, we're not saying very much. Are you hearing anything at all?
Oh, hold on, let me see. Let me stop sharing for a minute. Okay, how about now?
Yay. There we have it.
So
Yay, I
sorry
see
about
it.
that. So apparently it doesn't work when I'm sharing the screen. I am so sorry.
Good to know.
Okay. All right. So our interpreters should be in their language channels now and ready to go. All right, so just a disclaimer that
Đây là cái phần
so our Vietnamese interpreter, you should go into your Vietnamese channel, please.
I go to my Vietnamese channel now.
No, you're still in the English channel.
When I look at that, usually you say that assign me to the panelist, usually like that. I didn't see that
Oh.
button and I see the glove, so Vietnamese, and I go to it. So you have to assign me as a panelist, then I can go to that. Usually it works like that.
Yeah, good point.
So are the other interpreters in their respective rooms now?
One Vietnamese is in, yes.
Yeah. So for you,
R is in, okay.
so on the bottom, you should see a little box and you can hop into the Vietnamese channel. Okay, so I'm gonna assume he's in there.
Spanish is good. Okay, good.
Jiawei, can you make me a panelist, please?
I did
You have to make us panelists, sorry. Otherwise, we just talk on the same channel.
Yeah, I think just you have to put them in the panelist category.
They are. And all the other interpreters are already in their channels.
Okay.
Right? Okay, so Let's get started. So while every effort is made by the City of San Jose partners and interpreters to provide correct information, none of these parties will accept liability for misinterpreted, incomplete, old, or inaccurate information presented in good faith. Always consult with a financial or legal advisor on critical issues.
Trong khi mọi Do you still hear my voice?
Yes.
I don't know how, because I haven't been assigned as a panelist. Can you check with other interpreter whether they got the same problem?
No, everyone else. Can we check other interpreters? Are you in your rooms?
The Mandarin interpreter just posted a note saying that the
Yeah, I still
Vietnamese
hear you,
interpreter.
Phương Anh.
Can you say that again, Nathan?
The Mandarin interpreter posted a note saying the Vietnamese interpreter should log into his Zoom account with
Yeah.
the email corresponding with his Zoom. All the other
Exactly.
interpreters are good.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. Thank you.
Okay, I'll do that. Okay, I'll come back.
Perfect.
Thank you so much. You guys are really great to be helping out. We really appreciate it.
All right. Sorry, everyone. Okay, so this webinar will be, so we will start with our guest speakers, Sean Ha and Roger Miller. And at any time, if you guys have any questions, feel free to type your questions into our Q&A section. We will answer all the questions towards the end of the webinar, but feel free to type in your questions anytime. We will use the chat function to post links and information about this webinar. And there will be a post-webinar survey. It will be emailed to you at the end of the webinar. Those surveys will help us determine how we can improve our services to you. So please take some time to fill out the survey. I would like to also announce we have an upcoming webinar next Thursday, April 28th from 3:30 to 5 p.m. And that webinar is on small business grant and specifically on commercial rent debt.
Hey, Xiaowei, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah.
One thing I'm just thinking is when our Vietnamese interpreter returns, perhaps at the end of the presentation, we can just reread the teaser for the grant program, because I know a lot of our speakers might be interested in that, so that they don't miss that. And then that's all I wanted to say per Molly's note in the chat.
Perfect, thank you. And would you please remind me? All right, okay, so let's formally introduce our special guests. First, we have Xuan, and she's from the City of San Jose Small Business Ally. And she will be presenting about our CASP grant program from the City of San Jose. And we would like to introduce Roger Miller. He is a certified access specialist and also a construction manager from the Eagle Project Management. Thank you, both of you, for coming. And I will turn over the presentation to Sean.
Can I share my screen?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Again, my name is Swan Ha. I am one of the City of San Jose Small Business Ally. And here at the Small Business Ally program, we're a team of Swan and Juan. And between the two of us, we can assist customers in English, Spanish, and Vietnamese. Of course, Juan can assist customers in English and Spanish, and I can assist customers in English and Vietnamese. And our role is to help customers through the city's developmental processes in order to open a small business. And even though we work very closely with interdepartmental staff, such as the Fire Department, Public Works Department, Office of Cultural Affairs. We primarily assist small businesses through the building plan check and inspection process, and therefore we're housed in the Planning, Building, and Code Enforcement Department. Our team, again, serve as the customer's point of contact for city processes, any city processes. So if you don't know where to start here at the city, if you don't know where to go, what questions to ask, who to contact, you can start with us. And we're happy to help you figure out the right person to connect you with. And we're here to help you explain the logical steps, the schedules in terms of timelines for your project, how long it may take to get a building permit perhaps, and to figure out the general cost. Typically, the cost of a planning permit is a little more straightforward. However, a building permit may be a little more tricky to identify the exact cost. But we can provide you with an estimate if you can provide us with your scope of work and perhaps your costs of construction. We're here as your allies, your coach, and act as liaison between you and our city staff members to help you through the city permit processes, inspection processes, and business registration requirements to get your tax certificate with the City of San Jose. Most people refer to this as a business license. However, the city is not providing you with a license to conduct your business. It's just an annual tax. And typically when Juan and I, when we first meet with a customer who is in the beginning stage of getting their business started, when they're still looking at properties, we typically advise customers to check for 4 things before signing a lease or purchasing a property. And that is to look for zoning compliance, parking compliance for off-street parking, permit history for the location they're interested in, and accessibility compliance. In this presentation, we're going to focus on accessibility compliance. And however, if you are in the stage of looking for a new site for your new business, or you're wildly successful and looking to expand your business and would like assistance with zoning, parking requirement, and permit history, please don't hesitate to reach out to us and we're happy to help. And moving on to accessibility. So what is accessibility? The Americans with Disabilities Act, or ADA, became law in 1990. This civil rights law prohibits discrimination against individuals with disabilities in all areas of public life. And so this would include places of employment, schools, transportation, and all public and private places that are open to the general public. So the purpose of this law is to make sure that people with disabilities have the same rights and opportunities as everyone else. The California state government has set up its own codes and standards for accessibility, and these standards go into effect for any new building construction or any tenant improvement project that require a building permit. And therefore, if your project triggers a building permit, our building engineers and inspector will have the opportunity to assist and verify that features of your building and site enables a disabled person to access and use the facilities. Accessibility features will help people who use wheelchair, who have impaired hearing or vision, or people who have limited physical strength. And like I mentioned, Juan and I typically advise customer to check the site for accessibility compliance before signing a lease or purchasing a property. That is to allow you to be aware of possible upgrades that might be required in order to achieve full ADA accessibility compliance. It's also very important to know everything about a property before you make a big financial decision. And here we have on the bottom of the slide, you can see a link to our building division informational handout. Here I have the full handout, but you can use the link because the font may be very, very small. This handout will allow you to know more about accessibility, your responsibility as a property owner or a business tenant, what is expected of you, and what needs to be in compliant, or the general requirements. If you can see on the left-hand side of this handout, you can see a table of priorities in the order of importance by the California Building Code. And we like to call it the to, through, and within rule. And the priority is that you must provide an accessible route to your front door, your site of business. So an accessible route from the parking space needs to be provided, and an accessible route from the public sidewalk or public bus stop. So you need to provide a route, an accessible route to your front door. And all goods and services needs to be accessible as well inside your facilities. And if the building has multiple stories, you must provide access by ramp or elevator. The last priority is to provide, the third priority here is to provide an access to public toilets. There are other access points, but these are the priorities as as stated in the California Building Code. I did mention earlier that building plan check for ADA accessibility is triggered for new building construction or tenant improvement, or TI, that requires a building permit. However, please note that existing facilities are not exempt by grandfather provision. That means if you own, operate, lease, or lease to a business that serves to the public, then you have an obligation for compliance. The ADA, the Americans with Disability Law, recognizes that in order for people with disabilities to participate in everyday activities in their community, they need to have access to the goods and services provided by businesses. So for example, even if you are taking over a turnkey business, in this case, let's say at a restaurant, a site used to be a restaurant, you are moving in and operating it as a restaurant, you're not making any changes to the kitchen, to the floor plan, you're not making any changes that trigger a building permit. However, you still need to check when the building was constructed, when was the last time that site pulled a building permit and had their ADA accessibility reviewed. Because if they haven't made any upgrades and you're not sure when it was constructed, if it was constructed in, I don't know, 1970s, it would be a very good idea. It would be highly recommended to verify if your site of business is in compliance with all federal and state ADA standards. New editions of the California building codes are published every 3 years, so it's very important to stay up to date. To assist small businesses remove barriers that prevent their business from being fully accessible or usable by persons with disability, we created this CAS grant program. CAS stands for Certified Access Specialist, and this grant program was launched right before the shutdown, late February 2020. And the goal of this grant is to assist existing businesses, businesses that are already open and operating, that want to make proactive upgrades to their site of business in order to comply with accessibility requirements within their space. So qualifying projects will receive a credit to their project up to $8,000 for the cost to hire a private certified access specialist inspector to come to their location and either certify that the site fully complies with all federal and state disability access laws, or the written report would provide steps necessary to achieve that full compliance. And if you see here on the right side, on the second page of our bulletin, we do have a link where you can find a certified access specialist. If you click on that link, it would take you to the State of California Division of the State Architect. There you can locate a list of certified access specialists, and you can filter through to search for a specialist in your area. And when you see the report from the CAS inspector, if your project does require a building permit to make the necessary changes to achieve full compliance, the grant will also cover the cost of a building division plan review process and the inspection fees relating to the corrective improvement identified in the report. So this grant is something that we have implemented to, as a response to the rash of predatory ADA lawsuits targeting small businesses in recent years, businesses that are not accessible. Excuse me? So we're just basically trying to help small businesses to proactively make those changes and prevent an ADA lawsuit. I also want to note that this grant will not cover the cost of construction or the cost of materials for your constructions. It will not cover any legal fees either. It would only cover the cost to hire a certified access specialist and city permit and inspection fees. And in order to apply, please submit your plans and application to Juan or me, your small business ally. I also want to clarify that this grant is not a reimbursement program. It is a credit that we charge when you pull your building permit when plan review is complete. So for example, if your project costs $5,000 and your project plan review and inspection fee costs $5,000 and you've been approved for the grant, your grant, the grant would cover the $5,000 fee for plan review and inspection, and you would not need to pay out of pocket in that case. If your fees for building plan check and inspection costs $10,000, then the grant would cover up to $8,000 and the remaining $2,000 would be paid out of pocket. Just a little bit of background on our grant and the funding. This grant program is budgeted in the Certified Access Specialist program of the City General Fund. The funds for this program are raised as a result of the California Senate Bill 1186, which for the purpose of training municipal CAS inspectors, a $1 fee is charged for every new and renewed business tax registration. This charge ended in 2017, but was replaced by the California Assembly Bill 1379, which made the $1 fee permanent and increased it temporarily to $4 between January 1st, 2018, and it will end December 31st, 2023. Our building division was able to retain a percentage of this fee, And we call it the Disability Access and Education Revolving Fund. And this fund is used again to train and certify building inspector to ensure that through when your project come in for plan review, our building engineer and inspector can verify and ensure that your site is in full compliance with all state and federal ADA accessibilities. This bill also allows us to use the fees to fund programs that directly facilitate accessibility compliance by small businesses. So with that, we were able to create this CAS grant program. To apply and qualify for this grant program, your place of business must not have more than 50 employees. You must own a commercial business or a non-residential property in San Jose. If you're a commercial business tenant and you're leasing a site for your business, then you must have at least 3 years remaining on the lease agreement. Upon receiving the CAS grant and you're looking to submit your application for the grant, you must also include building plans that are stamped and signed by a licensed architect or a licensed engineer that address the improvements identified in your CAS report. And here is the first page of the CAS grant application. On here, you're able to find our contact information, our contact email on here, and a checklist of what to submit. And please include everything upon your application. Otherwise, we just have to come back and ask you for it. And for ADA accessibility upgrade projects, our building division, we do have an expedited building plan review service for you. This program will allow you to go through the plan check process and permit issuing process a little quicker. And upon submitting your plans to us, we will schedule an appointment, review appointment for your project, so you know exactly when your project is being reviewed. And typically we do include all of the trades included in this plan check includes planning, building, fire, and public works. Of course, for building review, as part of the building subtrade, there are also review for electrical, plumbing, mechanical in that process. And the purpose of this program is the purpose of this expedited plan check process is to assist existing businesses to go through the process quickly to achieve compliance. So we will not charge expedited city review fees for your project either. Typically, expedited plan review with the city of San Jose, we do charge a 50% more on top of your plan check fees for review. However, for this process, we will not charge the additional expedited fees. Again, to submit your plans, please contact Juan or me and to be pre-qualified. As opposed to the CAS grant, there are criteria for this expedited building plan check, even if your project does not qualify for the CAS grant program for any reason, but you do want to make ADA accessibility upgrades for your site, you can still submit your plans to us and we will take a look at your scope of work. Again, because we only have an hour and a half for building plan review, the scope of work must be limited or must not have complex or a lot of structural components in your scope of work. And if you have any questions, please let us know, and we're happy to help you make the determination if your project qualifies for this expedited building plan review or not, or if your project or if your small business qualify for the CAS grant program. This is the end of my presentation. Please let me know if you have any questions. I'm happy to answer them.
Great, thank you so much for that great presentation. I'm sure some of you have questions for her, but we're gonna hold on to the very end of this webinar. So thank you so much. Let's have Roger Miller start his presentation. Roger, can you confirm you can share your screen? Roger? I think you're muted, Roger.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, perfect.
Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, I'm Roger Miller. I'm a certified access specialist, and I'm going to talk a little bit about accessibility for the built environment. Some of my stuff's going to overlap what Juan already shared. She did a great job of giving you a thumbnail sketch of what the CAS program is about. But I'm going to give you a little more background and more discussion about what reports are involved. Let me start out with, I'm a certified access specialist and a construction manager. I am not an architect or an attorney. I can't give you legal advice, but I can point you to an attorney and work with your attorney if need be. The CAS program was created because there's an underlying issue throughout California and actually throughout the United States. The built environment today is not accessible. If you want to get a picture of that, just imagine yourself paralyzed for a day and look at what you'd have to do to get through the city. There's some interesting videos on how to do that on YouTube, but it's pretty difficult to navigate yourself through everything if you're disabled. And another important thing I want to point out is we have become politically correct with our terminology. We no longer use the term handicapped disabled. You see the person in the wheelchair disabled, he's not handicapped. He is quite capable when actually he does some pretty extreme stuff with his wheelchair. It's pretty interesting. The concept of the accessibility is equal. The idea is that you want to be able to give everybody an opportunity to have full use of your facility, no matter what disability they experience. As Juan said, the Americans with Disabilities Act was passed in 1990 by the first George Bush. It was the first milestone regulation that gave equal opportunity to people that are disabled. The federal government had, prior to that, and regulations required it for federal buildings going back into the 70s. But in 1990 is when the Americans with Disabilities Act made it universal to all public accommodations. That says it all. Discriminating against individuals because of a disability is illegal. The regulations in California are enforced by building permit and also by lawsuit, which I'm going to talk a little bit about the Unru Act, which brings the lawsuit feature into play. So important things to think about. The Americans with Disabilities Act really changed the life of people that are disabled. 1 in 5 Americans have some kind of disability. 1 in 10 have a severe disability. Nearly half of all the people over 65 have a disability. There are over 50 million people in the United States with disabilities. One thing to be note is that when people that are disabled find a business that they can patronize comfortably, they're likely to become regular customers. I was just recently at a restaurant where the only way you could get in was a set of stairs, and a family showed up with one person in a wheelchair and probably a dozen other people with them, and they came to the front door, couldn't get in, they went to another restaurant. So not only is it the law, and not only do you have the possibility of getting sued, it's just plain good business. The buying power of the disabled is $3 trillion. That's right, $3 trillion. So I'm not going to labor this. The message is that there's a lot of people out there with disabilities and you want to make your business accessible to them. So the $64 question is, how do I avoid a lawsuit? Well, the best way to do it is make your property fully accessible, but that's not always possible. So one of the things you can do is have your property inspected and develop an implementation plan. And that's where I come into play. Certified access specialist can do an inspection. And as Juan spoke earlier, you may want to consider having a pre-purchase inspection before you buy or lease property. Because in 1990, when Americans with Disabilities Act was passed, it said that any property that exists that's not fully accessible has to have a program of architectural barrier removal where it's readily achievable, which means that if you have barriers to accessibility, you were supposed in 1990 to start spending money to remove those barriers to existing properties. If your predecessor in a property that you're buying or leasing has not done that, you inherit the responsibility to do that. There's a lot of misconceptions out there about lawsuits. One of the things that people don't understand is the Americans with Disabilities Act is a building code. They think it's a building code, not a law. The ADA is a law. It's enforced by the Department of Justice, and it applies nationwide. The other common misconception is that ADA lawsuits are frivolous lawsuits. There are some lawsuits that are done by serial litigants, but in almost every case, the lawsuits are well-founded and identify actual barriers to accessibility. Another misconception is all plaintiffs are vexatious litigants, and that's just not the case. Some plaintiffs are actually injured or unable to use a property and have a valid complaint. One lawsuit I was involved in was a gentleman that showed up at a restaurant, could not use the bathroom, which was embarrassing for him. Wrote a letter to the owner of the property. A year later, he came and never got a response from the owner of the property. A year later, he came back and the bathroom still wasn't fixed, and then he filed the lawsuit. Another misconception is that pre-litigation notice is necessary before a lawsuit can be filed, and that is not the case. Somebody can show up at your property 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times and identify a barrier that prevents them from being able to use the property and then file a lawsuit. The other misconception is that only landlords are required to for compliance and are subject to lawsuits, and that's not the case. Landlords and tenants. One of the things I advise people is make sure when you negotiate a lease, whether you're the landlord or the tenant, be clear in identifying who's responsible for accessibility. Another case where I was involved in a lawsuit, the tenant and the landlord spent more money fighting each other to decide who would solve the problem than they spent fighting the plaintiff. Don't put yourself in that situation. Juan already talked about the fact that older buildings are not grandfathered, and I already mentioned you're supposed to have a program of barrier removal where it's readily accessible, where it's readily achievable. I'm sorry, not readily accessible. Another misconception is that once you settle an ADA lawsuit, you're done, but that's not the case. ADA law is anything that was not corrected in the initial lawsuit can be subject to another lawsuit. And that applies also when the building official comes and does his inspection. The building official inspects the work that's in the scope of service. It's the permit that's just identified with the permit. Areas outside the permit area, he does not have the responsibility for identifying. He also does not have identifying federal regulations, only the California Building Code. Another misconception is that using a licensed general contractor and getting a building permit is going to guarantee that you won't be sued. And that's just not the case. A licensed general contractor is generally not qualified to make design of accessibility features. You want to have an architect or a CAS review your drawings. You want to have somebody look at your property to make sure that you're getting all the features addressed. Anyway, that's enough of those. There's 4 basic types of facilities that have accessibility requirements. Federal facilities, which have the highest level of requirement. State and local government facilities, which are called Title II facilities. That'd be your state offices, your San Jose city offices, that sort of thing. Public accommodations and commercial facilities, that's what I think most everybody here is interested in. That'd be restaurants, stores, movie theaters, shopping centers, that sort of thing. And then also multifamily residential has requirements. I'm going to just stick with the public accommodations because I think that's what most of this audience is. As a public accommodation, you're required to comply with two sets of regulations. One's the Americans with Disabilities Act, and the other is the California Building Code. They're slightly different in what they require. California Building Code in some cases requires higher level of accessibility than the Americans with Disabilities Act and vice versa. So you're required to understand the interaction of those two codes and pick the one that pick the feature that provides the most accessibility. That's one of the things that we can help you with as a certified access specialist. One of the questions is, what are the most common things that are the source of lawsuits? And you can see the California Commission on Disability Access is required once a year to provide a report to the state legislature on the top 10 alleged construction-related ADA violations. And this is a list of the top 10. It's available on their website and in their report. You can see that in this period, which was 2020, there were 7,000 accessibility lawsuits. Most common accessibility lawsuits involve parking and path of travel and stuff exterior of the building. And the reason for that is it's easy for a litigant to file a lawsuit without having to come in your property, pull into your parking lot and see that the parking space isn't accessible, there's not a route to the front door, and the signage is wrong, and there you are in a lawsuit. As I said earlier, there's an ongoing process of regulations that have been going on since the 50s that have adjusted the accessibility regulations and tried to ease the lawsuit situation and train architects and certified access specialists to assist you. It's a living process. They don't typically change the technical requirements. In other words, the distance that the toilet needs to be from the wall and that sort of thing. It's more how the programs are administered. So how do I make my facility accessible? That's the question that you need to answer to be able to avoid getting a lawsuit. One of the key is hiring a professional. Don't go on the internet and search it and look for what you think is the best fit from the internet, because that's not necessarily the case. If you think it's expensive to hire a professional, wait until you hire an amateur and you have to redo it or you get sued and have a complaint. Can't tell you how many times I come out and inspect a property that has just been altered, and they've got the toilet paper dispenser in the wrong place, and they got the grab bars in the wrong place, and they have a ramp that's not the right slope, that sort of thing. So the process typically is hire a certified access specialist, have your facility inspected, develop an implementation plan, and follow that implementation plan. The implementation plan is based on the amount of money available from your property to be able to invest in accessibility improvements. So what is a certified access specialist? It's somebody that's been trained and passed a fairly rigorous exam, specializing in accessibility regulations. When I took the exam, there was 3,000 pages of material that we had to memorize for a closed book test. It was not easy. It was created by Senate Bill 1608 in 2008, and it's administered by the Department of State Architect. There's a total of 848 certified access specialists as of last week in the state of California. Not all of them do inspections. A lot of them are building officials and design professionals. The three main objectives of the CAS program are to reduce the number of serial lawsuits by promoting voluntary compliance and prevention. That means getting your property accessible. And it's also designed to help educate professionals in the building department in accessibility requirements so that they can help administer the program and help make sure that when you get a set of drawings permitted to do the construction, that they meet the requirements. As I mentioned earlier, the mechanism that you get sued in California is the Unru Act. It's an act that says that it's illegal to discriminate against people for a variety of reasons, and disabilities is included in that. And it stipulates in Civil Code 52A the amount of damages that you can be assessed, plus the attorney fees for your opposing counsel. So not only do you pay your attorney fees, but you pay their attorney fees. So when you're considering the cost of doing an inspection and getting ahead of accessibility, keep in mind that if you're spending less than $4,000 and plus legal fees, you're saving money against a lawsuit. So what we can do to help you to do it, what we're doing right now is educate owners that you have some liability. Make sure your designs are fully compliant. We can perform site surveys of accessibility upgrades, and we can assist you with litigation. So what's involved in the survey? So initially we need to do a pre-survey. We need to discuss with you what the scope of your property is and what the scope of the survey is going to be. We look at what regulations apply, and that depends on the funding and use of your property. We do a site survey where we take field measurements and photos and complete a draft report at this point. Then we can either do a client review meeting and site walk if necessary, or we can discuss it over the phone, or you can just review the report. And then we finalize the report. And the report at that point is called a preliminary report because it's required to have an implementation plan. And then we can work with you to help develop an implementation plan to start removing the barriers that are identified. And the California Building Code and the Americans with Disabilities Act give us a roadmap of the priority to do that. And your legal advisor or your attorney and your financial advisor can give us the roadmap of how much money should be spent each year. And then once all the implementation plan is completed, then we'll do a final report and either do CAS certification pending or CAS certified, depending on the status of your property. So one of the things that helps when we're figuring out how much an accessibility report is going to cost is we look at the elements we're going to inspect. So there's the initial scope of work, which is identifying the scope of what we're going to look at, developing checklists, and then there's the inspection and site. And this is a list of the types of things that we look at that are required to have accessibility features. Not all of them apply to your facility. Obviously, if you're a restaurant, you don't have transient lodging, guest rooms, or a swimming pool. But each of these things is things that we consider as elements that we'll look at. So we count how many doors there are, how many parking spaces there are, and that gives us an understanding of how much effort it's going to take to do your report. Based on that, we give you a fixed fee for your report and move forward with the report if you authorize it. And that's the report that Juan was discussing, that you submit to the building official and have the $8,000 credit if you're eligible for that. Now, there's some good news. There's some tax incentives that are available for you if you're a small business. You can deduct up to $15,000 per year for any business for removing barriers to accessibility. That includes our report. And there's also a funding program, Americans with Disabilities Act financing program through the state of California, where you can get small business or low interest loans to do accessibility improvements. So that concludes my presentation. Ready for questions?
All right, thank you, Roger. All right, so I'm gonna go through our questions, and our two guest speakers, feel free to jump in if that question falls into your area of expertise. All right, so let's go through our Q&A first. Our first question is from Mai Dong, and he says, what address or phone number if we have any questions about ADA? And is there a walk-in service?
From the city of San Jose, unfortunately, we don't have a walk-in service for that. But if you have specific questions in regards to ADA accessibility, or if you have any, we prefer to see the site of your business and maybe some plans. And that would really provide us with a frame of reference as to what your question is. And if you can send that to me, I can go to one of our building plan checker, building engineer, or inspector to assist you with that. But for right now, we do not have a walk-in service for ADA accessibility questions only.
Thank you. So I'm going to share my screen so all of you can have the contact information. One second. So the first one is our Office of Economic Development contact info, and then of course for our 2 guest speakers. All right, number 2. So are there a list of contractors?
So the city attorney unfortunately does not allow us to recommend any specific contractors to customers or members of the public. However, on the city website, we do have records of engineering firm, contracting firm, construction contractors who worked with the city of San Jose on previous projects in the city. However, this cannot be taken as a recommendation. These are just the person or companies who have worked with the city of San Jose before.
So I'd like to chime in on that. I really encourage you when you're doing accessibility improvements to reach out to a design professional or a certified access specialist that specializes in accessibility. Contractors are excellent at taking a set of drawings and turning them into a physical construction. They are not the people that interpret the code typically and come up with solutions. It's a complex process, and you can oftentimes make an improvement of one feature that defeats the accessibility features of another feature nearby.
Thank you. All right, so the next series of questions, Roger, I'm gonna let you say if it's too detailed for you to answer and you prefer them to send you an email afterwards, or you want to take a stab at answering the next few questions. Yeah. So the next one is by Dong. His very specific question, right? If there's a freestanding electric range at the corner in the common kitchen and some dimensions of clear space in front of the range, does it comply with ADA front approach? Or does it need to comply with side approach also?
I need more information to be able to answer that question.
Okay, so Dong, do you want to, if I give you permission, would you like to speak?
I think it'd be better if he emails the information to me.
Okay, alrighty. So Dong, if you can see Roger's email and phone number on the screen, and you can send him an email. Thank you. And the next one as well, Roger, let me know if you prefer it to be an appointment with you. It's from Haiti, and it's saying our business is located on the corner lot. We have one handicap parking space in front and more parking in the back. Do we need extra sign in the back to say our handicap is in front?
Again, I need more information. How many total parking spaces do you have? What's the layout of your property? Where's the entrance doors? There's more to it than the simple answer.
Okay. I guess that relates. Is it okay to have signs saying handicap parking and ramp access? So I think that falls into the similar situation. And would you please contact Roger Miller offline? Okay, next one. Yes, I will go to the chat questions after finishing off the Q&A section. So thank you. The next question, are there grants from the city of San Jose that does cover the cost of working with an architect or a construction vendor? I think that's more for Sean.
As of right now, I'm not aware. There's no grant from the city of San Jose to cover the cost of working with a private licensed architect or a contractor at this time.
There is the tax credit and tax deduction for accessibility improvements that I had on my next to the last slide. Check
No,
the
that's great.
tax person for that.
Mhm. All right, and our next question from Tihana. Why doesn't the city/county have inspectors to make sure the space is ADA compliant before the business even opens its door?
Yes, so as a part of our education and revolving fund, we do use those funds to help certify our building engineer and inspectors, so that through building plan review, when you submit your project for plan review, may it be a new construction or a tenant improvement, our engineer and inspector will verify during plan review and inspection, site inspection, if your site is in compliant with all state and federal access requirements.
All right, thank you. Our next question from Alex, would this webinar be available to view after its conclusion? And the answer is yes, it will be posted on our YouTube channel. Let me pull this up right now. So if you have a phone, you can scan this QR code to our YouTube channel. And I also have the link up here on the screen. And also after this webinar, you will receive an email, and that email will also contain a link to our YouTube channel. All right, moving on. Next one. So this one, again, it's very specific. So please let me know, Roger, if you can answer it. Does the city do residential EV charger installations, or should apply a permit before install an EV charger at residential home? Any building code should follow.
This is single family home.
Nathan, can you unmute Eileen if she would like to speak?
Single family dwellings are not covered by the accessibility regulations. Multi-family residential is covered.
Okay. Perfect.
And if you are wondering if a permit is triggered for your project to install a EV charger at your residential home, can you please email me here on the screen? My email is on the screen. If you can email me your address and your proposed project. I'm not very familiar with residential review processes or permit processes for residential homes, as I assist more with commercial businesses, but I can help get you the answer. I can connect you with our permit specialist who can help you with this.
Thank you. Okay, so the next series of questions from Tahana. So it's similar to your previous question, right? So why doesn't the city get involved in getting them in compliance, and how do people accept have to pay this out of pocket, and how much or what exactly does the grant cover? So Xuan, maybe just briefly explain that, and if still need more clarification, please feel free to send her an email or call her.
Yeah, I can go over briefly again. So our grant covers the cost of hiring a licensed certified access specialist to come to your site and conduct an inspection. And the report will either indicate that your site is in full compliance, or it will list out exactly what you need to upgrade, you need to change in order to achieve full compliance. So the grant, unfortunately, will only qualify projects that trigger a building permit to conduct those upgrades. And being in compliance is the responsibility of the commercial business tenant and the property owner. So it's that's why before signing a lease or purchasing a property, it's important to know if the site is fully compliant or not. If it's not in compliant, then there might be some negotiation between the commercial tenant and the property owner as to share the responsibility, or if it's the property owner's responsibility. Typically, in my experience, commercial tenants on their lease agreement, typically the landlord would identify if the business tenant requires any permits from the city, it's their responsibility. Most of the time, I do know that that's a clause on their lease agreement. But again, that's why it's very important to be aware before signing a lease or purchasing a property if the site is fully accessible or not. That will give you more information. You would be more aware, and you can perhaps negotiate with the property owner to upgrade your site before you move in. And depending the cost out of pocket. So for the certified access specialist, I can't really say how much that report will cost. I'm sure Roger can probably help me on this, but it depends on your use and the square footage of your place and so much more. Roger, can you shed light on this?
I can help you a little bit. It depends on your use. You saw the list of elements that I listed in the slide, how many elements I have to look at, how many doors, how many bathrooms, how many dining areas, how many parking spaces. Each of those takes a certain amount of time to look at, and that's how I calculate the cost of your report. For a typical small business, small store, small restaurant, not a large restaurant, $8,000 is more than enough to cover an accessibility assessment and report. For a large hotel that's got 200 rooms, that's not going to be the case.
All right, thank you. Oh, then the next
I
question.
will comment on something. I do a lot of business in a lot of cities and counties, and San Jose is the only city that I know of that has a grant program like this.
Great. Next question. So we have a very specific question from my Dome. It says, I have only one 5-inch step inside my restaurant. Do I need to have handrails built next to the step?
And need more information, but typically one riser is a set of stairs and needs handrails.
Wow. Good to know.
All right, and I believe you answered those questions, Sean. Next one. Will there be any changes to make it harder for these lawsuits to get to court? Wouldn't it make more sense to get a fix-it ticket and then a fine if no changes are made? That's what it, go ahead, Roger.
Bring that up with your state representative. It's been brought up year after year after year. And the argument that the disabled community has says is you've had since 1990 to do it and you haven't done it. Why should we give you another break? Not that I agree with that perspective, but that's the argument that's made.
Go ahead, Sean.
Yeah, so it's also in my understanding that once they cast certified access inspector provide you with a report, and the business owner or the property owner, business tenant begins to move forward with the scheduled improvement with a specific timeline, the business owner can invoke a qualified defendant status, where if they are sued for an access violation after the report was issued by the certified access specialist, as qualified defendant, the business owner can request a stay, a court stay of up to 60 days and an early evaluation conference that may reduce their statutory damages.
That is correct in state court. If it's a federal lawsuit, that doesn't apply.
Oh, thank you for the clarification.
Thank you. All right, next question from Mai Dong. For the restroom signs, the current requirement is to, sorry, which one should I use between ladies and gentlemen and all genders? I'm not quite sure what you're asking there.
The code that specifically identifies which restroom sign to put on the door.
Okay.
So refer to that section of the code and it gives you specific dimensions, mounting heights, color, etc.
All right, yeah, and my, if you, and I know, I see that you have many questions, so feel free to contact our guest speakers. Next one, from Lena Lee, and the question is, I got sued with ADA violation, no complied reception desk for my beauty salon, and we paid a lawyer $4,000 to handle the case. There was no action from plaintiff 9 months after we answered the court serving paper already. Can I get my money back from lawyer since it was no activity?
I'm sorry, I'm not very, I can't assist with legal advice. I'm not very familiar with this at all.
Yeah, I would suggest you talk to your lawyer.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. And our last question in our Q&A from Henry, if we have multiple businesses, how can the grant be applied?
For the grant, if you have multiple location in the city of San Jose, you can apply each location for one application. So if you have three sites, you can send us 3 applications for review.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And from our chat, let me just take a second to go through all of the questions. Are there any questions that are already answered? Please let me know.
We have David Estrada who has their hand up right now.
Okay.
Maybe we can go there and I'll look through the chat.
Okay, perfect. Can you unmute him for me?
Yep. Oh, I don't think I have that power.
Okay. All right. I'm gonna stop sharing, guys, so I can see the hand raise. All right, David, you can unmute yourself now and speak if you like.
Maybe David stepped away.
Okay. And the next hand raise, I'm only seeing 1 hand raised. All right, David, if you come back later, please raise your hands again so we can ask you to speak. Anyone else like to raise their hand and ask the questions directly to our guest speakers?
I see Tayana has unmuted themselves and then Molly has their hand up.
Okay, let's go to. And you both have permission to speak now. You can unmute yourself. Go ahead, Molly.
This is Molly. I was wondering whether or not the PowerPoints will be provided, and also one of the cool things about all of the Microsoft tools, including PowerPoint, is that it has an accessibility checker. And I was wondering if that was used on the presentations. I was seeing some contrast things, for example, in the red and white, and part of ensuring government ensuring information is available is making sure that the resources are also accessible. And so it's an excellent resource, and I will put the link in there. Then also recommending the Pacific ADA. There's lots of free answers for like the signage question. It can get technical, but there are people who can help. And so I wanted to suggest that as well. One of the things that I hope is that these presentations will focus on the benefits of including people and business owners and employees with disabilities. And I do appreciate the efforts that are being made now, for example, in language equity. So thank you for that part.
Thank you, Molly. And Tanhana, you have your hand raised and you can go ahead and speak. And Tahana Garcia, sorry if I mispronounced your name. All right, so I can come back to you if you're having some issues. All right, our next question is from, I see your hand raised, Tram Quinn. You can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yes, thank you for the presentation. Just wondering how we got access to the applications for the grant.
We do have the application available on our website for the City of San Jose CAS grant program. You can basically Google that City of San Jose CAS grant program, and it will send you to a landing page where all this information will be provided. Otherwise, you can feel free to email me, and I'm happy to provide you with our grant information.
Yep, thank you, Son. Yep, I've just emailed you the
Yes. Thank you.
All right. So I'm seeing some questions from our chat asking about if our slides can be shared. I'll ask permission from our two guest speakers if you both are willing to share the slides with our audience.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So I'll go ahead and so I'll have a list of people who are attending our webinar today, and I can go ahead and send those, attach those slides to the emails after this webinar. All right, any questions on the chat that needs to be addressed? Thank you.
There wasn't too much on the chat. Molly had, raised some interesting points, reminding us about the definition of disability is broad, and so those chats are worth reading. And then Tehana was having problems with their audio. And most of their questions were around sort of the responsibility and kind of where that falls with respect to the improvements. And I think we kind of addressed it. It's one of the things I think, that in a perfect world, I think that there would be a lot more sort of government resource to help, right? And maybe one day there will be, but yeah, that discussion around kind of the responsibility and where that falls, landlord, tenant, right? Swan kind of talked about that.
Can address that a little bit if you want me to. So the typical interface is the entrance door. The entrance door itself and everything inside the tenant property space is the tenant's responsibility, and the path to travel up to the entrance door and the landing outside the entrance door is typically the landlord's responsibility. However, when the lawsuit occurs, the plaintiff sues both parties and leaves it to them to sort out who's going to take care of the settlement. As Juan said, one of the things you want to do before you purchase or rent a property is make sure it's very clear who's responsible for what in the lease before you sign the lease. That way that avoids the confusion. because that can be an expensive proposition. And I'll cite it again, the example of the restaurant where the tenant and the landlord spent more money fighting between each other than they spent fighting the plaintiff to settle the lawsuit.
All right, thank you, Roger. All right. Looks like there are other questions regarding contact information. Let me share the screen one more time. Right, for the contact information. All right, let me see. There's 2 more questions coming up. All right, so we already answered that question, Henry. Thank you. All right, if there's any other questions, please type it in right now. We have about 15 minutes left. Or anyone like to speak, you can raise your hands and we can give you permission to speak. Oh, 3, okay. And I can't see, okay, there it is. All right. So it's but Tahana, can you speak now? Can you unmute yourself? No.
So I see Tejana Garcia's question in the chat. So how many people will be able to receive the CAS grant is her question. So right now we have $40,000 allocated to this CAS grant program, and it's first come, first serve. We're looking to, depending on interest, like I mentioned earlier, our CAS grant program launched at the end of February 2020. And at that time, it's understandable that small businesses are just trying to stay afloat and operate when everything is shutting down. Therefore, we have not had many interested businesses applying for our grant. And therefore, there's still quite a lot of funding. Please send in your application if you're interested. And I just want to clarify that we are allocated $40,000 for this fiscal year. And next fiscal year, if there's a lot of interest, we can request for more based on how many applicants we receive this year.
Thank you. I'm seeing Trem, you have a question again? Can unmute yourself.
Yes, the question here is, do we need to get the report first before we apply for the grant, or we apply for the grant first, and then use it to get the report?
Yes, please do get the CAS report first, because part of the submittal package, we ask for the CAS report and the building plans that are that has been prepared by a licensed architect or a licensed engineer to address those comments or items listed in your CAS report.
So could there be a case where we pay to get the report and then the grant is not approved, therefore we then have to pay for the report out of pocket?
So the goal of our grant is to assist existing small businesses to get into compliance with all state and federal regulations and standards. So if you invited if you hired a CAS inspector to come to your place and they identified your place as to be in full compliance, and that's terrific. However, if they identify that you need to change the height of the mirror or add signage to your to your entrance or exits, then those are very minor things that you can do that does not trigger a building permit. And by following through with that, that will allow your site to be in full compliance. And that's our goal. However, due to the nature of the funding for our grant program, we can unfortunately only qualify projects that trigger a building permit to qualify for the grant.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, our next question, James. I'm going to give you permission to speak. You can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Great, thank you. My name is James Townsend. I have a commercial property, and I thought that after Mr. Johnson, who seems to be a serial litigator against non-compliance, I thought that the California governor issued a new ruling that now they have to give landlords and tenants a 90-day window to address anything which they cited as non-compliance, to try to bring it into compliance before they could actually file a formal lawsuit. Maybe Mr. Miller can comment on that. Thank you.
I'm not aware of any regulation that does that. There is a regulation that says that if you have an accessibility report and you file it with the state, you have a 120-day grace period to fix everything. For minor stuff, that's to take care of signage and striping and that sort of stuff. But I'm not aware of any Senate bills or regulations that give a 90-day grace period at this point.
Thank you.
All right, our next question is from Jason, 1998. You have permission to speak now. You can unmute yourself. It's Jason, 1998. All right, we can come back to you. Let me lower your hand. Go ahead and raise your hand again if you want to speak again. And next question is from Molly. Oh, sorry.
Jason, are you there? Jason typed his, I think
Okay.
Jason typed their question into the chat.
Okay.
And it looks like Jason was looking for ADA inspector referrals.
Yeah.
And I think Swan had shared, and maybe Molly did too, the official sort of state list of CASP inspectors in the chat. When someone says ADA inspector, I think they mean CASP inspector, right? Maybe we can post that again.
Yeah, I need to get the private ADA inspector to certify the premises it's ADA compliances.
I think what you're looking for is a certified access specialist.
Yes.
And the DSA has a website that has a list of all 848 of them.
We'll post that again right now. Let me find it. Thank you, Roger.
And I'm one of those. You can reach out to me if you want to.
That's how we found you.
Where you could get it at? Where you could get it at?
We're posting it right now. Give us a
Okay.
Yeah.
Juan, can you repost it? It's so far back in the chat. Thank you, Juan. Thank you in advance.
Yeah, and Jason, Roger, he's actually one of the certified access specialists, and his contact information is on the screen right now.
Where is it?
There it is. Juan just posted it again.
Thank you, Juan.
All right, and Molly, I have another question. Go ahead and speak.
This is Molly, sorry, I
Okay.
forgot to just lower it before. My
Alrighty, sorry about that. All right, our next question, we have another hand raised from Hedi Sharat. Go ahead and unmute yourself, please.
Thank you so much. My question is, I purchased this property that is dual. First floor is business, second floor is residential. So there's everything there, handicap signs and everything, but this is only for the business, is that right? Hello? Oh, shoot. I'm here.
The second floor is family dwelling or multi-family residential?
Sorry, I lost you for a second. So
How many
first floor, go ahead.
How many units on the second floor?
It's only one. It's one bedroom and a kitchen.
No
Addition, they're on addition.
requirements for a single family dwelling. It only
Is
applies,
this,
it only applies if you have 3 apartments or 4 condominiums or townhouses.
no, it's only one single home. It's one of those, it's a corner lot, is a historic home. And first floor is business. There are about 4 or 5 offices there, but it's one business. Second floor is residential. And it's one bedroom residential.
The second floor has no accessibility regulations that govern.
So I'm fine, I'm okay for the second floor as long as if I'm not renting it to somebody. Okay. So first floor, all these goes for the first floor. And I was the one asking question because we do have accessibility on the 11th Street, but because it's a corner place, we don't have accessibility from San Carlos.
That's the kind of thing we do a site inspection for. We're glad to do that for you.
So that's the one I need to find out if they need to come. Okay, thank you so much.
All right,
Thank you.
thank you for your question. All right, one more hand. Hey, we have Eva J. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yes, I have a question. We're looking into installing accessible entry signage at a doorway. And where can we purchase those signs? And can they be installed at any height, or are there instructions on where they should be installed?
By the sign from any sign vendor, typically.
We already had a report done by certified access specialist, and recommendation, one of the recommendation is to install accessible entry signage at the doorway. So can we purchase, can I just Google and purchase those signs on internet, or are there any specific place to purchase those signs, and do they have to be posted at a certain height at the doorway?
That specific information is in the California Building Code, Chapter 11B.
I'm sorry, say it again.
It's in the California Building Code, Chapter 11B.
Chapter 11. Okay. And another question is, we also will be installing a push button for automatic to open door automatically. Does this require pulling out a permit?
That's too technical question for this forum.
It would depend on what equipment you're installing and where you're installing it. I would need more information.
Yeah.
Install a remote auto door opening device at level landing.
Based on what you're telling me right now, I'm going to say yes, you will need a permit.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you for all those great questions. We have actually come to the end of our webinar time. I just like to remind everyone that we do have another webinar next week, next Thursday from 3:30 to 5, and that is regarding small business grant. and specifically for if you owe any commercial rent. So look out for another registration link in your emails. With that said, I would like to thank everyone for attending our webinar, and thank you our guest speakers, Sean and Roger. Thank you so much. And their information is right now still on the screen, so feel free to contact them for any further questions. All right, thank you, everybody. Have a good evening.
Yay, Roger and Swan.
Yay.
When I raise my hand.